Welcome to Women of the Wild,
where education and opportunities are key,
and friendships are made to last a lifetime.
Did you get him?
You think we got him? You think we got him? We got him.
All right, Skylar, what do we got here?
We've got a nice looking rip-off.
Oh, there she is. You dropped our great ghost.
Give me a hug.
Welcome back to Season 2 Women of the Wild podcast. We would like to first start off by thanking our title sponsors for the 2024 year. Atlantic Coral Enterprise, one of the largest import dealers in the world with excellent quality for hides, skulls, shells, and amazing gifts for friends and family or even your household. You can find them at AtlanticCoralEnterprise.com. RM Custom Call, multiple world championships from Main Street to Live Duck. American made, veteran owned. When you want to win on the stage or in the blind, we have you covered. Small shop, big sound. You can find them at rmcustomcall.com or on Instagram. We also have Rhino Land Safaris, providing exceptional quality with unmatched hospitality and cuisine, offering African safaris, a destination hunt for the avid rifle or bow hunter with some of the best trophy management South Africa has to offer. You can find them at rhinoland.co.za or on Facebook, Instagram.
Hey everyone, Andy Lehman here from ACC Crappie Sticks. Just want to let you know about our crappie baits and jig heads. We have a wide selection of the hottest colors and big eye crappie jig heads in the most popular colors and sizes. Check them all out at accrappiesticks.com. Thank you.
And now for today's episode, we hope you enjoy. Welcome back to Season 2 Women of the Wild podcast. I'm your host, Felicia Marie, and I am here with co-host today, Hannah Weingold from the west side of the state of Michigan. Hi, Hannah. How are you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We have a wonderful guest that Hannah and I actually had the pleasure to meet back at a live event here in Michigan. And we got to meet with this gentleman who is a great advocate for the outdoors, conservation specialist, but also does so much work with working dogs, which is actually one of the main topics we want to discuss today. So we want to introduce Ronnie Boehme. How are you doing, Ronnie?
If it was any better, it would be against the law.
I love it. So I would love to dive into who you are, let our listeners know, who you are, where you got started, and what your mission and passion is with everything in the outdoors that you're doing.
Wow, that's going to be a mouthful. How much time do we?
As much as you want.
All right. Well, I was born and raised in the city of Chicago, which right off the bat, you didn't see a lot of outdoor. We were outdoors our whole lives, right? But it was in the alleys and in the streets and hanging out on railroad tracks. I mean, that was kind of our public, like the whole city was our public land because there was no prohibitions on going anywhere. You just went out the door and went wandering. We'd go up to Kedzie Avenue or Pulaski Avenue and walk up and down. And so like we were out of doors all day long, but we were kind of in a monoculture of cement, but it still felt like we were, outdoors every day of our lives growing up. And I had for where I grew up in Chicago, I guess I would say I was blessed. We had two really large cemeteries that bordered us to the east and to the south. And as kids, we were always looking for something to do, somewhere to go climb trees. Because if you climbed in your neighbor's tree, they're gonna come out and yell at you to get off the lawn. So we literally, me and many, many kids from our schools literally hung out in the cemeteries. And like the younger or the more athletic ones, the ones that like say baseball, out in the unimproved area of Evergreen Cemetery, there was a huge, they would literally bring lawnmowers out. It would hijack their dad's lawnmower. And we kept this one area of the cemetery completely cut down. So you could play baseball or football. Nobody played soccer back then. And, but then other ones, me and my friends, we were always like literally lurking through the headstones, climbing in trees, building forts, digging holes in the ground to make, why we felt like rodents, I don't know. We would, when I say steal, it's because back in the day, you weren't allowed to take anything out of your garage, right? I mean, that's a tool that had to be there come Saturday. But we would steal our dad's shovels and pickaxes. We would literally go out in the woods of the unimproved, and they had vast unimproved area. The cemetery was barely full of graves. It had more unimproved area than it had improved. And we would go out and dig holes and throw tree branches over them and make like little forts in the ground. So me and a small group of friends that I'm still friends with today, we were just kind of like outliers. And so I don't know if it would all came out the same if we didn't have the cemeteries. If I lived a mile north of there, I might have just jumped trains for a hobby. And but with that, somebody got a slingshot, and then we all had to get slingshots. Then somebody got a bow and arrow. But now I'm talking not a bow and arrow lethal enough to shoot anything with, but they'd be just like a little short bow you get from what now would be like a Cracker Barrel, right? And we kind of started with playing like hunters and Indians and cowboys. Like we were just always shooting each other with something. And then it just progressed into one of my friends, I think he shot a squirrel, somehow got a squirrel. And we decided to, with no internet, no television show, it must have been from a Hardy Boys book. We decided to, skin it and try to cook it. So it was a weird way to start, like to fast forward, otherwise this would take hours, fast forward to high school. Through high school, a friend of ours' dad started taking us trap shooting. We didn't even know. It got me out of going to church as a sophomore. And I would go shooting with them. And then I got my other friends to go with on Fridays. You could go to this trap range as soon as we had a driver's license. And we could shoot shotguns. Most of our parents, mine didn't. My dad bought mine for me through my friend's dad. But we started somehow just evolving to shooting shotguns, and it was so rare. Like if you took my whole graduating class, there probably wasn't 10 of them that even knew one end of a gun went off, right? It just wasn't in that culture. They all knew how to break into cars and hotwire a car, but they certainly didn't know how to load a shotgun. So for our high school reunion or our high school graduation, to fast forward, most people went down to Florida or Texas to go get their yayas out drinking on the beach. But we went down to Tennessee and we went wild boar hunting. So we were just kind of this weird group of about 6 guys that just, even though we were raised in Chicago, we had only one family member or one friend's dad who shot the shotguns, and he was a cop and he didn't hunt. And then it turns out we had one friend whose dad actually hunted, but literally grown up all these years with my friend David, I didn't even know his dad hunted. He just would go out on a occasional Saturday with his brother and they would hunt some pheasants or rabbits. And it was a very strange, for where I grew up, it was a very strange exposure. And I won't say it spoke to me. What I liked about it was the camaraderie. We seemed closer than the football team. We seemed closer than the baseball play. Like we were such a small minority that we were just thick as thieves. And it was all the conversations we'd have talking about it, planning it, because of doing it, we didn't get to do it very much, So yeah, I started out in the city, and actually, at one point ran a really small trap line along the railroad tracks with a friend of mine, and he had caught a fox, and we caught a few squirrels, and we actually used to catch pheasants. There was pheasants in the cemetery still, by gluing corn down to a trap plate with Elmer's glue. And we would catch pheasants by the neck for taxidermy. So yeah, it was kind of a strange start, but I always wanted to be like every kid outside, but I wanted to be out in the grass and out in the woods. So it just kind of came, it just morphed in from that. And then always had a love of dogs. Like we had a house dog, and I didn't dream of it being a hunting dog or anything, but it was, I think probably early on, it was the dog thing, that having a pet dog, that I knew someday that like I'd have to have a hunting dog. But I wasn't like, come on, Sandy, we're going to go hunting rabbits. The dog was not going to hunt anything, right? But like in my dreams, like when I have a dog, I wanted to go hunting. And that probably came from the one and only television show that was on in my day, which was called American Sportsman. So now we have everything to watch, from YouTube to Netflix to outdoor channels. There was one television show that featured hunting, and they would show upland hunting on that show at least a couple times a year, or duck hunting. And that was like, that gave me the sight picture for what I wanted to do. I didn't know why I wanted to do it, but it gave me the sight picture.
It was just like in your blood for you.
It must have been, because I don't think that exposure in the city was enough. But funny thing is, out of those maybe core 6 people, 4 of them are still around, and 4 of them still do it to some extent. Like it kind of stuck with them. But I think really it was about the camaraderie before anything else, the rat pack, if you will, of who we were.
I love it. And so many of our younger generation are missing that upbringing, right? Like I have 2 little boys that are avidly outdoors, and they do the same things that you're talking of with no like push towards doing it, right? Like digging the holes in the backyard and pulling the branches over top, building forts. It's something as a kid that I feel like it's either in your blood or it's not, that
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're brought up in a city or if you're out in the country. You just have like this intuition, like, I want to go do this.
Right. Yeah. I and that kind of could go into all kinds of conversations about getting kids into the outdoors. And I'm kind of an advocate of what you just said. If they have it, foster it. But if they don't, I don't know that it's the right thing to do. It's kind of like when it'd be like back in grade school, pushing me into the reading club. My mom knew I wasn't a very good reader. There was just no point in signing me up for summer reading courses. It wasn't going to work. But yeah, I'm always curious how my now grandkids, which one of those, or will any of them, like digging a hole and become, I think any kid could like digging a hole, making a fort for some reason. I don't think that makes you a hunter, but yeah, I wonder how it is for you guys to do you because when the era I'm talking about in the 60s and 70s, we never saw a woman hunting. I'm not saying they didn't. There was somebody somewhere that hunted, but we just didn't see it. And
right.
And it's almost kind of like, how did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an 80s baby, and it was it was taboo for a female to be out there. And it was very difficult to have anyone that was willing to share any type of education. So it was something that in my late teens, I picked it up. I mean, I went out fishing with my dad from the time I was knee high, but aside from that, like to get out hunting and fishing, it was something that I had to immerse myself in and basically learn how to do it all myself. And I had friends or friends' dads that would, as I got into my later teens and into my 20s, would kind of foster that, like you said, that drive. Somebody that wants to do it, you have to foster it, you have to push it. But I agree with you, if it's a kid that doesn't have that want or desire, you're not doing any good to push it and force it. And I think that's how you can create unsafe situations, is having somebody that doesn't want to do it. Hannah, what about you for your upbringing as a female?
Yeah, so I remember growing up and I was always outside digging around in the tall grass, trying to catch bugs, going to the park, scouring the ditches for like tadpoles, just always getting dirty, always catching animals I shouldn't, bringing them home, putting them in my locker at school. My parents were kind of like, whatever, we're just going to let you go be feral. My dad was a big deer hunter, so I always got excited when he'd bring deer home. It was really interesting just to see him, kind of touch him. I always liked playing with the ears or like poking the eyes. I don't know why that was a big thing, but kind of just messing with it. He got me a bow, I believe when I was 5, and just had me shooting it outside. I enjoyed doing that. Had me shooting the higher caliber rifles when I was about 8, so like 30-06, 308, getting me excited about that, and I just kind of clung on to it. And then I just kind of started going out with him more, sitting in his tree stand. It was always exciting. I got to watch him harvest a couple deer that way. I remember climbing up, being terrified to get up 25 feet up in that tree stand, but once I got up there, it was just something different about sitting up in the woods and having it be quiet and just be us. And I really enjoyed that. And I ended up getting my first deer when I was 13, and I just dove headfirst into it. And it just felt good to provide that for my family, but also get away from reality, as you call it, or as you can call it. It's me and 3 others. That's our siblings. And 3 of us out of the 4 are interested in the outdoors. My youngest brother, that's the oldest, he ended up shooting a deer when he was, I think he was like 16, and he was like, that's not my thing, I'm not into it. My other brother, him and I went and got some sheep at a ranch that was out here, with our bows, just for something to do as like a Christmas present. And he liked it, but he kind of fell off, but he's getting back into it. Like, he's asking me questions. I'm bringing him out, showing him how to do it. And then my younger sister, who she sees me as an idol, which is, it makes me feel really good. She's always like sharing the pictures that I post online, or like asking me about what I did, because I'm so well-rounded now. Waterfowl, upland bird, fishing for all these different species, traveling. So she really wants to get into it. I bought her first technical like camo suit for her birthday this past year. Got her some fancy scent lock. And I brought her out a couple days ago to shoot my 12 gauge and see if she was comfortable to go turkey hunting with me. And she did great. There was no complaints. There was a little bit of nervousness, and she shot, and she's like, can I shoot some more? So it felt really good to be able to be that, being brought up like that, just always outside, always interested in animals, and then just getting her involved too. Just as a woman, it feels great to have that little sister or like girlfriends say, hey, I'm kind of nervous to do it, getting them out and getting them into it. And same with my kids. Like my oldest, he's 5, and he's always like, Mom, a turkey, shoot it. Or a deer. And he's always
July. It's July, honey. We can't shoot the turkeys in July.
It's not turkey season, but I'll try, buddy.
Yeah.
So I think it's important too, just that exposure. I know I went to the high school I went to, they're doing a fishing team, like a tournament team club. There's multiple schools around my area that are doing sportsman clubs. And I just think it's really important to get that exposure and introduction, especially to get hunter numbers back up, and just get people educated about the matter, even if they aren't going to do it themselves, just understanding why other people do it.
Yeah. Something you said kind of rang a bell with me. Having 3 daughters, I have twin girls that are, boy, they're going to be mad, 38, I think, 37, 38. And our youngest daughter is 3 years younger. And they would see me come home with pheasants or rabbits or squirrel, and they were the same way. They were always poking and prodding at it. And the younger one never wanted to do it, but I think it was a little bit because there was a little sibling rivalry. Like they'd say, come on, Jesse, and like, no, I want to go do something else. I mean, she's not anti-hunting, but the twins were doing that same thing, always poking at them. And they wanted, if I cleaned them and gutted them, they were poking their fingers in it. And
Dissect
it
it.
was like, yeah. And it was almost like, no, that's not normal. But so maybe what no one's ever realized here is if 10% of the population has this, whatever this is, maybe it's always been 10% of the girls, but they just never had the exposure to it.
Absolutely.
Because it's never going to go. I don't think we're ever going to make 30% of men and 30% of women do this, but it's kind of cool that maybe the true 10% of women outdoors people are coming to light. I mean, at least it's going to double our numbers.
For sure. And it's funny that you say that because we have a lot of women. So with what we do here at Women of the Wild is we like to spread education and inspiration to women, because we realized that there was a couple of generations where education was kind of pushed aside, and it was, hand her a gun and see how she does. And if she likes it, she likes it. If not, back to whatever she was doing with her mom. Yeah. And we have so many women now that we do these educational courses. So we do, online educational courses every month. We do in-person educational courses at least once a quarter, but then we host events all over, and we do a lot here in Michigan. But what we're seeing is these women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s that are, I've always wanted to do this and I didn't know where to start. So you're right. I do think that there's a group out there, especially of women, that just never had the exposure, but they've always had it and just didn't know how to fulfill it.
Yeah. If they'd have had a backyard, they'd have been digging a hole like everybody else and putting branches over the top and acting like a chipmunk. Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to think about that, like I said, I am sure that only if you globally, there probably isn't 10% of the globe that actually does things, but we're finding that other 10% in women. Both of my daughters, I wouldn't say they hunt actively because they're in the middle of raising children like you guys, and but they always do something every year. Their husbands are a little bit more obsessed with it than they're, but they're not doing it because their husbands did it. They're doing it because I did it and I took them places. But I did it. That's something I'm going to ask both of you. This might turn into my interview to you. I get worried about like a child, literally a child, I don't care, boy or girl, carrying a weapon. And it's a scary premise, right? I mean, that thing, it is 100% deadly. And so I didn't, until they were physically old enough, strong enough to hold the weapon, where I knew, because I wasn't going to take them out in the woods and carry the gun. I wanted them to be able to be at least strong enough to hold it, strong enough to and be aware of the barrel. The one thing I would be concerned about, and I don't know how you guys did it. You mentioned, Hannah, taking your 5-year-old, right? You said, or no, you. I'm sorry, I got the
9-year-old sister.
Yeah,
I think
Was she old? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Was she old enough to? Would you let her go grab a gun out of the gun case, put it in the gun case, load it, and shoot it by herself?
I would not. In my opinion, since it's turkey hunting, I would be sitting with her.
Yeah.
I would be right there. She was saying it's a little heavier, so I'm gonna get like a tripod for it. I think it's needing to be supervised.
Yeah.
Until you believe that they're mature, they've done it long enough, is important. I know my dad let me go off with a firearm by myself. He was like 100 yards away, but like deer season, I'd go sit on the ground and have like a little fort set up, and I'd just sit on the ground, be able to have my gun on it. He didn't let me go out and do that until I was 15.
Right. That would be, because most of the times the mom would say, no, they're not, and that would be boy or girl. No, you're not sending them out there with a gun yet, right?
Right.
I don't know how young the people are that come to your programs, but I think exposing the young ones to everything, but making them wait is, I just don't like, I don't like putting that, like the bow and arrow, I don't find that nearly as dangerous. Certainly it's dangerous, but
Sure.
it's not likely that it's going to go off and blow off their own foot, right? You know, so I just think like, yeah, what you guys are doing to find that, I'll just keep calling it the 10%. I think that's fantastic. But I always get nervous. And to this day, I'm nervous. I don't know if I ever told anybody this. I shot a guy pretty bad grouse hunting about 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And literally the guy could have died. And not since then, but I've always been like super barrel aware. And so like when I remember watching my twin girls, I took them to Point Mouly out by Saginaw Bay for a duck hunt. And I think they were 15. And we weren't getting any ducks whatsoever. Nothing was coming by the blind. And they said, Dad, can we just get up and walk around? I said, yeah, there's nothing flying. And I remember both of them had their one had it at port arms and the other one had it on her shoulder. And I watched them walking down the beach and I was like, it was so that like that picture in my head, like if I was an artist, I could draw it, and I'll bet you there was a smile. I couldn't see their faces, but they felt like they arrived, right? They're walking away from Dad with their guns. And if they saw something, they probably would have took a poke at it too.
Yeah. And I think, so one of the big passions that we have here is we have that saying of you can take a man hunting, you've taken a man hunting, you take a woman hunting, and now you've introduced a community because they're going to share it with their friends. They're going to share it with their spouses. They're going to share it with their children. But as far as bringing youth involved, because we don't just do women's hunts, we do co-ed events, we do youth geared events as well, whether that's hunting, fishing, but it's definitely a maturity level. And in all honesty, like I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. My 14-year-old was very mature and ready for this long before my 10-year-old at that age bracket. Yeah. But then, like you said, even at 14 years old, I'm still not going to go let him, just go get a gun out of the safe and take it out. Right. It's still, to me, it's very concerning that there's a lot of education that needs to be involved with it. And there's we put safety as the forefront always. So with our events, it's safety first, education is second, and a harvest is just a bonus. It's really about that learning, being educated, being safe, and just having fun. Like that's really the biggest mission, but safety is always the forefront. And regardless of that age bracket, it doesn't matter if you're 12 or if you're 40, that safety, we will go over it until we feel confident in you, but you also have the confidence. And like you said, barrel awareness, it's one of those things that you kind of have it or you don't, and you can be trained into it, but sometimes it takes an experience to make you barrel aware if you're not. Yeah. And I think that that's something that having the exposure, the more exposure you have at especially a young age, it does benefit. But like our upland hunts are typically 13 and up, where, I just had this conversation with the pheasant farm last week because I have a 10-year-old who is very safe, who is out there every single day with me, and he understands it. And we have a firearm that's fitted for him. He knows how to use it. He knows how to yield it. He's safe. I feel that he's mature enough to get out there and try his first pheasant hunt, but on an event with other kids present, probably not.
Yeah. That's a scary proposition. And I mean, you guys are taking on a lot because, and I'm sure I would hope you guys have a good, safe track record so far.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's got to be in your mind all the time. Like nothing can go wrong with this, right? Nothing can go
always
wrong. Yeah. We don't care if they miss. We just have a misfire. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I don't even care if you pull the trigger as long as you're being safe. Like we do waterfowl hunts, and I tell the girls all the time, honestly, because we instill safety as that forefront, we don't have issues. We have girls who are they feel bad that they didn't pull the trigger because they were like, it didn't make me feel comfortable. I said, you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Don't ever feel bad for doing that. You were safe 100% of the time, and that's what matters. You'll get a
Yeah.
bird the next time. Like, that's okay. But yeah, safety is always the forefront.
Yeah.
And it should be.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always kind of joke, and this is something I've probably talked about on a couple podcasts off and on, usually when I'm having about, 6 or 7 beers, which I'm not this morning. When I see people that put their kids on a backpack and put headphones on them, right? And they're going to go out. I'm like, you could still fall. I'm not saying the gun's going to go. There's where I'd be like, well, why don't you just take your 2-year-old on a nature walk? I kind of feel like some parents are jumping the gun, like, yeah, but I still want to get to hunt, so I'm going to put headphones on my 2 or 3-year-old in a backpack. That if my kids do that, they're going to hear about it from me. I haven't seen it happen yet, but I think you don't make it. It sounds like you guys are like taking the right course. Like you're not trying to get 5-year-olds out there.
No,
we'll
take them fishing.
Oh yeah.
If it's not involving a firearm, absolutely we'll do like fishing events, or like you said, nature walks, shed hunting, foraging. But when it comes to firearms, it's 13 and up, and sometimes depending on the event, it's 16 or 18 and up.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear.
We had a girl, I believe she was 11 years old. She got to go bow fishing with us last year, and that was so much fun.
Yeah.
But you're shooting bows that are, cranked up to maybe 15 to 20 for her. So yeah, no, but we do. And we have, like, this year every year we go to Africa, we have a 16-year-old that's coming with us to Africa. So
what?
Somebody that's already hunted, has some experience, but again, safety is the key. So the very first day when we get there, every person, because they're co-ed, so whether you're a man, a woman, or a child, the very first day is range day. We want to make sure you're safe. We want to make sure that you're going to be taking ethical shots. So we will sit at that range until we feel that you're hitting that target and that you're being safe. Because not only do we want to make sure you're being safe, we want to make sure animals are ethically being taken as well.
Yeah. How big is I know this is turning into a Ron asking questions, but how big is the organization currently in Michigan? Is there a size to it, or am I not picturing it as a size?
So what we have 5 girls that are on our staff in the state of Michigan. And Hannah and myself are included in that. We have a couple of other girls. Then we have a private women's group that's women's only, because we want to make sure that they are in a safe situation to be able to ask questions. And we have just over 6,000 women in that. However, we don't have a number of exact Michigan because we are national based, but we have, I would say, probably at least 20% of that 6,000 is from Michigan.
Wow, that's great.
And that's just a guesstimated number, but we host a lot here in Michigan. We go out to the west side of the state. We go out to, St. Clair. I guide here in Michigan, so I'm in Southeast Michigan, that we do events down here. We do an intro to waterfowl every year. And that is kind of what, going along the same premise. We do an intro to waterfowl where they come out, and on day 1, we meet with DNR, and they have a conversation about the tags that they need to properly have. We talk about bird transportation. We talk about bird identification, and we just have a really great dinner with DNR. And then Saturday they come out and it's all education. So it is for someone who has never even held a firearm, and we go through habitat, we go through weather conditions, we go through safety of that firearm, we go through stationary targets, clay shooting. Then we talk about decoys, blind etiquette, brushing in blinds, all of that. And then we move to a simulated hunt, which is where we put the girls in A-frames, and we put them with a couple of girls, but only one girl has a loaded gun at a time. The other girl's gun is empty, but she still has a gun. And then we basically throw clays and simulate as if it were birds coming in. So they get the feel of a hunt before the actual hunt. And then on Sunday, we take them on a bird hunt.
Wow. I'm impressed. Because in our day, it was certainly, there was an outlier somewhere. I just didn't happen to know any women that hunted, but we just kind of went at it blindly, right?
Right.
You guys are doing a really nice job of like, this is how it's going to look. Because the first time I went duck hunting, I didn't know a decoy from an anchor, I mean, so I give you credit for what you're doing. That's pretty extensive. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, and we host like intro to shotguns. So like as we talked about it earlier, like that there was almost like these generations that almost skipped the education and it was just hand them a gun and go shoot something. So what we like to do is reel that back in, and we'll actually do we team up with Muzzy Pheasant Farm in Corona near the Flint area, and we host shotgun clinics like an academy where these girls come out. They learn the inner workings of their shotgun. They learn how to shoot it. They learn how to tear it down completely and clean it, put it back together. They learn how to reload shells. And then we take them out on like a little mock pheasant hunt afterwards with just like 1 or 2 birds to get the actual experience.
Wow.
But that's like I think it's like a 5-hour, 6-hour class that we do with these girls. And that's like intro to your firearm before you even get into the field. Because I mean, I've been out with men that didn't know how to put a plug in their gun. So to me, that shows me that education isn't being brought as a forefront, that it's just, here's your gun, go shoot something. And we're just missing that, which then it's going to lack on our next generations. So that's our big fundamental process is we teach you so you can teach others.
Wow. I'm impressed. I wish you guys were around when my kids were younger.
Well, we're here now, so you bring those little ones to us.
Well, Mara will be, she another 10 years. Your organization, she'll probably be a member of it. Yeah.
Oh, that would be awesome. Well, we are going to jump to a quick commercial break and hear from our mid-segment sponsors, but we will be right back, and we are going to dive into Ronnie Boehme with the Hunting Dog Podcast.
Share your love of the outdoors with your little ones through the exciting adventures in Dr. Josh Farr's children's books. As an avid sportsman, Dr. Josh Farr has taken his passion for the outdoors and uses his vivid storytelling to teach valuable lessons and appreciation of the world. Learn the alphabet through the ABCs of hunting. Find joy in exploring the outdoors with Let's Go Out and Play and more. You and your child will love learning about nature with Dr. Josh Farr. See all of his books now at drjoshfarr.com. That's DRJOSHFARR.com.
Weeby Knives, a brand of skinning, fleshing, and butchering knives perfect for the hunters, trappers, and fishermen, with a unique high-quality knife for animals of all shapes and sizes. You can find them and more information at weebyknives.com or on Facebook, Instagram. Stonehouse Digital Consulting. Elevate your small business with Stonehouse's expert marketing solutions. Ignite your online presence and thrive with a tailored strategy to drive your growth. You can find them and more information at stonehousedigitalconsulting.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Livingston County Pheasants Forever, Chapter 465, with a mission to conserve pheasant, quail, and other wildlife through habitat improvements, public access, education, and conservation. You can contribute by joining the meetings on the first Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. at the Howell American Legion Hall on the corner of M59 and Grand River. For more information and to get involved, you can find them at pf465.com or on Facebook, Instagram. Dreamcatcher Charters, a Michigan-based guide service for walleye, sturgeon, and duck hunting, with a passion that drives their success, sharing the phenomenal Michigan waterways with everyone. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram. Feather Moon Outdoors, offering calls made from select materials. Every pot is fine-tuned in the house using the highest quality materials available. Also offering diaphragm, slate, glass, grunt calls, and more. For more information, you can find them at feathermoonoutdoors.com or on Facebook, Instagram. Stay tuned, more podcasts to come.
Welcome back. We are here with Ronnie Boehme and Hannah Weingold, one of our PRs for Women of the Wild, and we have been diving into kind of the upbringing of hunting and safety. But now what we want to kind of shift gears and talk to you about one of your passions, because I know Hannah and myself, we love our dogs, and so do you. And you run a podcast, the Hunting Dog Podcast.
Yep.
You have, is it Bronco Italianos?
I still have one. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm still known for that breed because it was a rare breed when people started seeing it. Well, it's still a rare breed. And yeah, but that a lot of people, I still get calls about Bronco Italianos because obviously they saw it on television a lot. And I kind of brought a breed that shouldn't have been brought to the forefront a little early. But yeah, I've been I've been, let's say, I've been with dogs for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into the podcast, because it's a great resource for anyone that wants to get their dogs out there or just get more information, but also kind of what your setup is of what you're running with your working dogs.
Well, I will say I went through what a lot of people do when there's so much more education, to your point earlier about what you girls are doing. There's just a lot more education about dogs now, so people don't go into it so blindly. But I went into my first couple dogs just thinking, well, that's a German Shorthair Pointer. It's got to hunt. I did not have a path to take. There wasn't anything to watch. You could read a book, but reading a book doesn't really explain your dog to you. And I guess the big thing that changed for me is when I found a group called North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association. And that's where we got a lot of education on dog breeds, dog training, ethics, and even in the testing situation of it, gun handling, because the person goes out with judges and you got to give them a gun, but it's not loaded. It's almost like, starting them over, even though they're a hunter, they've got a hunting dog. They want to show you how good it is. And we still don't give them a loaded gun. Right. But that's what kind of changed it for me, was getting a group that was like into the weeds of the dogs and understanding the training of it, because the training of the dog, you could literally get a dog and I've got one right now. Very little training, but his breeding was such that he pretty much does everything he's supposed to do. I mean, I didn't have to work on, you probably, if you've had a pointing dog, some people are like, oh, my dog's not pointing, right? Well, that's the biggest fear when you get a pointing dog. Like, he might be a little too immature, or his pointing instinct might be weak. But learning all this from NAVDA and jumping into the judging of dogs, that's kind of what started me on this like deep dive into dogs, dog breeds. I'm not a great student of school, but when it's a subject I'm interested in, I'll dive deep into it. Like, I want to know the starting day history of every dog breed and breeder out there. I love the fact that these creatures are so simple yet so complicated, and they can bring you so much joy and so much aggravation at the same time. They're not as bad as kids, but it's the challenge of it. And I don't know if you asked me how the podcast literally came from jumping on another podcast after a crane hunt. And I thought, this was early on, there was a lot of podcasts out there, but there wasn't like it is now. I thought you had to have a studio and an engineer and a sound person. And when we did this podcast at the kitchen table while we just got done with the hunt, I immediately went to, God, I love telling stories about the hunt, even if it's that day, right? And just like when you drive somewhere with your friends, you absolutely will rehash the story from the last hunt to nauseum, right? But you do it. And when I realized you could sit at a kitchen table and do it, I literally went home from that, ordered a recording device, and did my first couple ones tipping the recording device to my cell phone, because I just wanted to capture the story. So then it turned into like, oh, if I'm going to do this, I have to get into all facets of hunting, which would be habitat and training and dog history. So my passion for that history of hunting, of dogs, of people, that's what keeps me putting out episodes almost every week, so to speak. And it's really morphed. I'm sure you've heard I've heard people say it, and I probably said it, but I don't want to ever hear it or see it in writing. I have heard so many people say, oh, I wouldn't hunt if it wasn't for dogs. I'm like, well, then I don't understand that, but I probably felt that way 20 years ago when I was so proud of my dogs. Now they're just like a family to me. And I've got one that we say hunts backwards. She'd be great. She'd be a great hunter if you wanted to walk backwards with a gun. She's always behind, and I don't even care to change her. She's fine, you know. She'll do what she does. So now I'm just more into the history and how people got there and trying to help them on their dog journey. Because I don't know anybody that gets into dogs for the wrong reason, but I know people get over their skis every day of the week, right? And if I had something to leave behind, it's like I straightened out a couple dozen people over my lifetime about what dogs really are.
Yeah, it's hunting with dogs is a whole new level. Like you can hunt solo, you can hunt independently, but just like that camaraderie that's desired with other people, especially like waterfowl, pheasant, there is a different dynamic that a working dog adds to me. I would never say that I wouldn't do it without them, but it definitely brings a whole new level of joy. And that dog that has that natural instinct to do it, that just does it and does such a good job. It's unmatched to watch something like that in the field. And Hannah and I don't have per se bird dogs. Mine is more tracking and than anything. So the dynamic of the dogs, of all the versatility of what dogs have the capabilities to get out there and do and be a companion, like those jack of all trades dogs are pretty neat, that you see that they're out there pheasant hunting, they're out there waterfowl hunting, but they're able to deer track. The amount that a trainer, like as the owner, has to put into a dog like that, to me is it's very respectable. So what are your, obviously your main focus is with more so bird dogs.
Right.
And I've seen you've done, episodes on your Weimar, was it Women in Weimaraners, or was that the title of the show?
Recently, we put together a few long form interviews with breeders. And one of them was Camille Rice with Weimaraners. Another one was Nancy Beth Clements with short hairs. And we did one with Bob Ferris with poodle pointers. And that was driven out of what I was saying. I love getting as much information as I can from the horse's mouth. When you read it, you got to remember anything written is gone over by an editor. It's rarely the author's complete thoughts, right? But when you interview somebody, you really get the gold. You mine for the gold. And yeah, we've done them onto Weimaraners, poodle pointers, and short hairs. That's something we may or may not do going forward, because what we found out is not everybody is as interested in the history of dog breeders and what they put into them. A lot of people are still on their first dog and they're just worried about getting it to retrieve or getting it to sit still in a blind. And I think we kind of went a little too deep on that, actually. But it was fun to do, and it's something I like. If there's such a thing as a legacy, I know the people have watched it, enjoyed it. They're like, when's the next episode? And I'm like, that's an hour of editing. You don't realize how expensive that was to make, But yeah, I hope to do more of that education, but somehow condense it without making it, dog breeding for dummies, or, I don't want to make it a Reader Digest version, but I think we can show people more in a shorter amount of time. I think I'll be honest with you, I think we took a long format and we should have went a little shorter.
Yeah. And it's an interesting though, because what a lot of people, or I guess this is my opinion, a lot of people don't realize is doing that research and history on those breeds and knowing what to look for in breeds is going to set you up for success for a dog that matches you, because not all dogs are created equal, and every person is so individualized that you do need to do that research, and you should learn some of that history to pick the right dog for you and what you want to do with it.
I've got to ask now. So Hannah and Felicia, what are the breeds? You said they're not actually bird dogs. What are your two breeds of dogs? What's Hannah's?
Yeah, so I have a Basset Hound.
Okay.
And I kind of jumped the gun. I'm not gonna hide that fact. I was like, I want a Basset. They're cute. They're adorable. I found him and went and picked him up. And then I realized, like, hey, he's a hound. I've heard how notorious they are for being stubborn and crazy. So I want him to have a job. And I actually found the United Blood Trackers organization, and they hosted a seminar right at the Boy Scout camp in my area. So I went over there with my, I think it was 8 weeks at the time, the puppy, and I learned the foundation and all the resources for training and getting them out there. And I was interested in tracking just because I hear too many people say, yeah, I shot this deer. It was a bad shot. Never found it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be another resource, even for myself or like family members, to be able to go out and have that chance to find that animal and not let it go to waste, and, you know, use a tag when you need to.
Yeah, you had to be the only person that showed up with a basset hound.
Yeah, a lot of people had the Catahoula leopards.
Yeah.
The Bavarian mountain hounds are really popular with the tracking.
Right.
And I wanted a bloodhound, but I was like getting into it, starting out, I want something a little smaller. He's still strong. He's like 60 pounds, but yeah.
But have you successfully blood tracked with him?
Oh yeah, our first year, we had 2 successful tracks, and they were gut and one was a liver shot. So we found 2 bucks, and it was kind of like me learning him, but also him learning what he was going to do. So I trained him mainly on hoof scent with a little bit of blood, because with those bad shots, you're not going to have full blood. So he did good. This year I think we did 6 tracks, 4 successful tracks. And one of them, we got down to like a lower part of, it was kind of like a river runoff, really wet. So I didn't want to keep going because I didn't have waders on. I just had tall knee boots, and he air scented a deer all the way across on the other side. So the hunter walked around and got his doe. So, I mean, it's fun. It's something to do when I'm done sitting in the stand, and it's good for him. He loves doing it. Like, I have a bell for his harness, so he knows when it's his job time to go work. He gets super excited. So it's a great bonding time for us too.
Yeah, I think it puts, I personally, I've shot a couple of deer, a couple of caribou, and a couple of bear, but it's all by invite. I've never had, but having a dog for recovery, I would vote for a law, and every deer hunter would, or half the deer hunters would hang me up. I would go to the European model that you are not allowed to hunt big game unless you either own or know somebody that can help you do it. Because it's terrible losing a pheasant, you know, losing 40 pounds of meat. That's like, I know it's unavoidable 100% of the times, but it's a lot better chance. I think recovery. I've always been a little envious of that. I've had a dog that could do it, but I couldn't take him to another property, you know, but he had that propensity. And he did find a deer at one point, but yeah, I think that's cool. I mean, but the bassets, like when you said that, half the reason I got those Bracos when I saw them was like, oh man, I love those big long ears, right? And I was like, I don't care if they're that good or bad. I went for the look, you know. I've done that. Felicia, what's your dog breed? Can't hear you. How did you pick a bloodhound? Was it for the same thing? Was it for recovery, or did you just want the bloodhound? Because I know people who just want a bloodhound, you know.
Yeah, so I actually, this is my 3rd bloodhound. I grew up with a hound, and I did junior showmanship. So I would show dogs as a teen. Like we talked about earlier, had that love for the outdoors, but always had a deep passion for the dogs. Yeah. And I would show large breed dogs. So Bernese Mountain Dogs, Newfoundlands, Weimaraners, Bull Mastiffs. And then I got a bloodhound. And that bloodhound, it had a personality unlike any other dog I had ever met. I've always told people, you want a dog that listens to you, you get a lab. You want a dog that you're on their agenda, you get a hound. And Jake, he was a red bone. That was like the color. He was a true bloodhound, but he was the deep red. Yeah. And he just, I can't even explain it. He stole a piece of my heart. And then when I got into my adulthood, I got bloodhounds again. And it was a personality thing, but I was very aware and conscious of the fact that they are a working dog, that you have to keep them mentally and physically stimulated. So I actually joined the Michigan SARS team, and I did search and rescue with them for a few years, started them both at 8 weeks old. And I was a little bit impulsive, right? Like I got my first male bloodhound as an adult, and I got him into the SARS training at 8 weeks old. Loved it. He did so good. He had that natural instinct to do it. He had really high recovery rates. And within like 8 months, I bought a female. And I bought them. I paid extra for the breeding rights and everything, but I never bred either of them. My male ended up with health issues. And I never felt that he was a good fit to do anything with. If they would have both certified and continued and done great, I would have done something with like a bloodline to carry that gene on, but I didn't. And my female, when I got her at 8 weeks old, I put her in the Michigan SARS training as well. They did great. My male got sick, and he was pretty young when we found out that he was having issues with his renal function and cancer and things like that. So I ended up medically retiring him, but I knew I needed to keep that going. Yeah. So we started recovery. We started shed hunting, dabbled in training for morel mushrooms. And my dogs are like one of my kids. They're an extension to our family. They're not just a dog. And some of these training programs were like, okay, if you have a working dog, they can't sleep in your bed. And I said, well, then I'm not continuing this program because my dogs do whatever they want. They're on the couch, they're in my bed, like they're a facet of my home. But what I started doing is, do you remember the toss across game?
Yeah.
So I would put
tic-tac-toe with bean bags.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would put holes in the bottom of the toss across games, and I would hide treats in a couple of them and play like tic-tac-toe with my dogs. Or you have all these Amazon boxes stacking up. So I'd go put a couple of like chopped up hot dogs or something in them, and we would play games in the yard together. And it just became this really fun way to keep them mentally stimulated. And they're great dogs, but if you aren't mentally stimulating them, they get a little wiry on you. And Hollywood persona has portrayed them to be this really laid back dog, but in all reality, they're pretty high strung, and they're big. Like my male I just lost him back in November. But he was like a good 110 pounds in his heyday. And my female, she's pushing 90 pounds, and she's like, she was pushing over 100. She's lost a little bit of weight after losing my male, but they're big dogs, and they're hard to maintain. And I'm not a big person. I'm 5 foot, 100 pounds soaking wet. So my dogs weigh as much as I do, and they pull hard. But you have to learn how to control them, and you have to understand, like, to me, a loose bloodhound is a dead bloodhound. My dogs will never be off leash.
Right.
You just have to do your research on those breeds. But yeah, I didn't have the thought of, I'm getting this dog for this purpose. I knew I wanted this dog, and I knew I needed to do something to appease them mentally and physically.
Right. Well, I've seen such a progression when I started in NAVDA that I talked about earlier, which was for me the education, the camaraderie. We would see a woman handler once a year, and then twice. And then what I found, and maybe that's, I don't want to say it's because of the dog, but the regularity of going to like that kind of a test, or a federation test, or an AKC test, it's in all facets of dog testing, and is how much women are now participating in it. And I always wondered, well, was it the chicken or the egg? Was it the dog, and like you, and said, oh, now I got to find something to do with it? Or was it, I got to have a dog to do it? So in your case, it was, I wanted the dog, I got to figure out something to do with it. And in Hannah's case, it was like, that bloodhound's, or that basset's really cute. Let's see what it can do. But in neither case neither of you drew the expectation ahead of time. It sounds like you fell for the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm in a reverse role now because I want that dog that I can use. Like I know what I want to utilize the dog for now, and I want a dog that's beyond just tracking, and I want upland, I want waterfowl. So I've actually been doing a lot of digging, a lot of research now, and now I'm trying to find the right breed as an addition into the home to do what I want it to do. So it's almost backwards now.
Yeah.
And where I'm kind of landing is like I've always had that interest in the Broncos because they have that hound look to them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Big sucker for that look. But I've really fallen for like Julie. I know that's a mutual friend we have here in Michigan. Julie does the German side of the GSPs.
Right.
And I've talked to her. We've met up a few times, and I've gone and watched her dogs work because I want to educate myself. Or like a Gordon setter. I'm a big fan of them, but do I fall for them because of the looks? Like that's where I'm having a hard time with it.
Well, believe me, everybody has a hard time with it. I've told people that you could find, if you found the right breeder / mentor, you'll fall in love with that breed. But I can tell you, there are people that, like with the Broncos, there are people that absolutely, I will ask them back in the day when I bred, I will say, what made you want to get a Bronco? And they said, well, they just look cool. And I'd always like, oh boy, we're going for looks first, right? But that's just human nature too, you know. A dog that I'm really impressed with is the small Munsterlander. I've judged a lot of them over the years, and I don't want one because of the coat, like just because of the long fur. Like it's not going to get me because I like the way they look. I like the way they act. I'm not getting it because of the fur maintenance, right? But there are people that they're like, no, they got to have that breed first, and then they'll overcome the obstacles, whether it's grooming or slobber from a Bronco. And I've told people, if you're a fastidious housekeeper, you don't want a Bronco in the house. There'll be like a bloodhound with all that extra
shoelaces.
And when they shake their head, it's glue on the wall, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so, I call them shoelaces.
Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, I keep spit rags in my back pocket, like at all times.
Right. Now, I bet you if Bassets do it, but they probably just do it at a floor level, right? It doesn't go up far enough to hit the deer and the antlers on your wall when they shake.
On your ceiling.
Yeah, not like my Mastiffs did. We had Mastiffs growing up, and it was like we would move and we would be cleaning the house, and there's just stains all over the ceiling.
Oh yeah.
His biggest thing, it's not really like the slobber, just like drool. So when I go to feed him, he's just pouring out of his mouth.
Oh, gross.
So what would be like your tip to someone who is looking for that addition to their outdoor activities? What would be your biggest tip for people when they are looking to add a dog to their home?
I would absolutely tell people, because there's so much information out there and there's so many events everywhere, I would tell anybody to go meet the breed. Like, don't just read up about the breed. Don't just watch it on YouTube. And every club, every breed in this country will have a breed club, and they'll have events. Yeah, you might, depending on where you live, you might have to do a little traveling. But, you know, if you live out in the middle of Wyoming, you're going to be a little restricted on meeting every breed. But we live here in the Midwest and or the Great Lakes, and there's no excuse to not meet the breed. And if you meet the right breeder or the right person who's an advocate of that breed, they don't have to be a breeder. They're going to want to show you that dog, and they're not showing off, but they're like, oh yeah, this is why I like the breed. And go beyond just meeting it, but say, is there any way I could come watch him work? Is there any way I could, you know, like you said with Julie, like I want to go to a test and watch, and then it's like, wow. Then it gives you a sight picture for what you want to have. So I would say find that breed. Don't just Google it, and for God's sakes, don't do what breed's right for me on the internet. Because that'll come up with. I've had people that, you know, were looking for Broncos, and the email was almost like a form letter. I've got it narrowed down to Drahthaars, Visulas and Bracos. I'm like, what? You couldn't get 3 more different dogs, right?
Right.
One runs at the speed of light. One could kill another dog in the worst case scenario. And the other one is just going to slobber up your house. Like, but they went on a breed profile and they answered personality questions about themselves. And then the computer spits out, look at these 3 breeds. So yeah, definitely meet the breed and try to spend some time with it. And most people are going to be real honest about, if they're open enough to meet you, spend some time with you at a hunt test or even the show. You said you show dogs. I think that's a great place to meet breeds. You can go to the big show in Kalamazoo, the UKC show, Premier, and you'll see every sporting dog in Michigan there in the show ring.
Mhm.
And I think people, there's a bit of a separation. It's almost a divisiveness, and I don't like it, that, oh, that's a show dog and it's not a working dog. The best show dogs usually are working dogs. And I will tell you, some of the best working dogs I know were also show dogs. The amount of behavior and impulse control you need to work on a show dog to be in a room with 1,000 other dogs and not act like a ninny on a leash and let other people look at it and act like you're in church for, a couple hours. Those dogs have a good noodle on their head. Now, I'm not saying all of them hunt, but a dog show is a great place to meet a breed. And, I would also say for, another way to do it, you can't be a wallflower. You've got to be that person that doesn't mind asking questions, and don't be embarrassed to ask questions. I mean, you don't want to aggravate somebody until you know they feel like talking to you, but you can't just go there and wish you asked a question when you got home. Ask those questions, and I'm sure in all of your courses you do, showing people from fishing to hunting to shooting. You want those people to ask questions because now they're looking for an answer.
Absolutely.
So you've got to ask questions. And
Yeah.
then that may or may not be, you won't be able to tell it's the right breed because we can't live in a parallel universe and go like, oh, I wonder how it would have been if I got a German short hair and I ended up getting a Vizsla, right? But ask questions. I just don't think people ask enough questions.
I agree. I think people get scared to ask. Like, they don't want to come off as like ignorant to something, and nobody wants to be like naive, but really the only way to ever learn is to ask those questions. So we definitely always push like ask. And whether like, if that's the thing too, like we do host online education courses or in-person education courses of working with your dog. We have some coming up this year. And we tell people, like, you have to ask, because if you're thinking it, someone else probably is too.
Right.
And I would rather you ask and have the answer than, like you said, leave wishing you would have asked.
Right. So yeah, that would be my recommendations. Meet people, meet the breeds, and ask questions. Just realize, you could ask too many. I only had one person, him and his wife, they're sweethearts, but they came in with a legal sheet of questions, and I was like, wow, this is, I don't really have 2 hours, right? So take it step by step, but yeah, ask questions. Yeah.
Yes. But it does show that they're serious when they come in like
Mhm.
that. And they have those
They were
questions.
serious, 100% serious. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and
I'd
it's
rather have them than the ones that just wanted the long ears.
right. Or those impulse, which I've fallen victim to. Now I'm just like Julie and I talked about it because she doesn't have any pups coming this year. She's like, maybe next year, but I talked to Mark and he's got Gordons, and I was like, honestly, I don't feel that I'm ready for it yet. Like, I'm just doing my homework. So I want to watch the Gordons in the field. I want to come watch, the other dogs, the Munsterlanders, the Drosseyers. I want to watch them all work before I make a choice. So now I've almost reverted away from that impulse of, oh, I like the way it looks, to I know that I want both. Like, I want to know that it's a desired breed aesthetically for me, but I also want to know that it's a breed that's going to do everything that I want. And if it's not, it's okay to keep looking.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great way to wrap that up is even though you meet somebody and you meet the breed and you ask the questions, then you got to ask yourself the hard question. Like, do I have a reservation about this? Because I think we all start with a little bit of impulse because we all want to get going in our travels, in our journey with it. But yeah, it may not be the right breed. But if you get a well-bred dog, and what I mean is a dog that's balanced in its desire and its cooperation. Cooperation is a trait. It's not, obedience is taught. Cooperation is given. If you get a well-bred dog that's got a balance of desire and cooperation, it'll end up being the right breed for you. But that's also tricky,
And I always get when talking with all these other breeders, they love their dog and their specific breed so much that it pushes that drive and that excitement onto you. So I always tell people, make sure that you are aware of, like, when you're talking to these people, that you take a minute to think about it before you do it, because you're adding another life into your family for hopefully many years to come. That don't be impulsive about it, and like take a second and be like, okay, am I falling in love with it just based off because they are so in love with it, or is this really what I want?
Right. Yeah. There's definitely people out there that have, and they're breeders, they're well known, and they do have rose-colored glasses on. They really think that this is the second coming of Christ, and it's just another dog. And if they happen to have one, like I said, it's well bred and it's got a good noodle on it, I could see why they do that. But I think what helped me the most and will carry me till I'm retired this show when I go, is when I got to judge all these different breeds of dogs, I got to realize that the same characteristics you're looking for in a dog, they really do exist in every breed. But we here in America, we tend to breed for what we like. And in Europe, they tended to breed for performance. And they weren't afraid to say, that's what you talked about, Julie, with the DK dogs. There is a process in those, what I'll say, the German clubs, that they will say, okay, we're not breeding that dog. And you'd be like, yeah, but he's great. Well, it doesn't have good teeth. Like, what's that got to do with it? Well, they've held themselves to a higher standard than we have in America when it came to, like, all the dogs we have here. I always say, you better thank Europe for them, because I don't think we've done anything here outstanding when it comes to creating a new dog breed.
Yeah, her and I actually, I met her at a facility and got to watch her run her DKs, and we talked about that, how much more goes into that specific breed than what we're doing and seeing here with, like, your typical GSP. And I was very impressed with what you just said, that they are not breeding for, it's not all aesthetics, it's not all of this, it is performance and it is health, and it has to have, it has to check every single box for it to be bred. And I was very impressed with that, because here you have, anybody and their brother is out there buying dogs and breeding them, and they can tell you that they're field trial dogs, but just the effort behind them, and it's pretty remarkable.
Good breeders are the key. They really are. And I will not ever say that I was a conscientious breeder, as far as I would do health testing and I wanted to share, I'm selling a hunting dog. Yes, my dogs, the sire and dam, are both going to hunt. They're both going to be tested. They may not both pass their tests, but I'm going to know what I've got. But a true breeding program is even to the point of confirmation. People have that's been literally thrown out the door in this country in some cases. Where if that dog is, I have a wire-haired Vizsla right now, and I bought it with the intention of, I like the breed, I met the breed, I watched it perform, and I went and got it, and it's 1.5 inches under standard height, and it has a bad bite in its teeth. Now, I could be like, oh, but he's so cool. He's such a cool dog. Everybody loves Tagus, right? he's off the table for breeding. I mean, if they were trying to save the breed and he was the last male, I'd say, I guess we're going to lose the breed because I wouldn't have done that 20 years ago or 25 years ago. But yeah, when breeders don't wear rose-colored glasses, and it's not hard to find. It's just, you got to find them. They should always tell you the pros and the cons of the breed or of their breeding, right?
Yes.
And that's hard to do. People get all about titles, and I can tell you, just because it's a titled dog does not mean it should reproduce. It just doesn't.
Absolutely.
Right. So where do we go from there? I've
Well,
already
we are
on all the breeders.
We are actually going to jump to another commercial break to hear from
Yep.
our ending segment sponsors. And we're going to be right back because we're going to dive into upland conservation a little bit with you.
Okay.
And now to the final segment to this week's episode of Women of the Wild podcast. We will conclude this segment by thanking our closing sponsors. Stay tuned for more of this week's episode after this short word from our sponsors. Muzzy Pheasant Farms, a mid-Michigan family-owned and operated pheasant game preserve that is open year-round. Muzzy offers educational courses and hunts. They are family-oriented, creating a great opportunity for new and seasoned upland hunters. With no membership required, come hunt with Muzzy Pheasant Farms. You can find more information at muzzypheasantfarms.com or check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Blast and Cast Guide Service is a veteran-owned and operated Michigan-based guide service for the Great Lakes. With decades of experience of fishing and waterfowl, they ensure a safe and enjoyable trip every time. You can check them out at blastandcastguideservice.com or on Facebook and Instagram. Ultimate Veteran Adventures. UVA offers outdoor therapy, recreation, and camaraderie through hunting and fishing adventures around the country for veterans, active duty military, Gold Star families, and first responders. You can find them at ultimateveteranadventures.com or on Facebook and Instagram. Sawmill Creek Bait and Lures, a husband and wife owned and operated company, the home of the C4, one of the best trapping canine lures on the market. You can find them at sawmillcreekbaitandlures.com or on Facebook and Instagram. Wicked 7 Outdoors, a Southwest Texas outfitter guide service with an exceptional care and quality of backcountry mountain hunts for free-range aoudad. Also offering high fence and low fence exotics, come immerse yourself in the outdoor experience. You can find Wicked 7 Outdoors on Facebook and Instagram. Misguided Outdoors is a female-driven Michigan-based guide service offering turkey and waterfowl hunts. Misguided is focused on educating women and youth, providing a hands-on hunt experience for all ages. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram. We thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
So welcome back. We are here talking with Ronnie Boehme from Michigan, and we've gone over kind of like the upbringing of hunting and the facets of life that it instilled in you, but also hunters and women. Talked about a little bit of the Hunting Dog podcast that you're running, which is great episodes for those who want to get out and listen and get involved with a working dog. But also now what we'd like to kind of switch gears towards is upland hunting, which is one of your big passions, and kind of dive into that with you of a conversation of conservation efforts here in Michigan and for people to get involved with it.
Well, I've said this on many podcasts when people ask me. When I started, again, I didn't pay attention to habitat, conservation, or anything. I thought I went to a DU banquet and I thought I was supporting wetlands, right? In a sense, in a little micro sense, I was, because the money I bid on things went to conservation, but that's not why I was bidding on them. I was like, oh, I want that on my wall. I wasn't like, I'm going to be giving $250 to a wetlands project. So early on, I didn't have that feeling. And I would not say I wasn't a bad advocate of it, but I was kind of ignorant to what it took. I recently did a podcast with Pheasants Forever and Rough Grouse Society. They formed a partnership working mostly on woodcock and quail, because that's a two species that can intermingle different times of the year. I'm kind of butchering that up, but they said something on that one that we're losing 300 to 500 acres a day across the country for development, for housing, for roads, for shopping. So I never gave that a lot of thought. And the same thing with when I moved to Michigan, there were rough grouse running into the front window of our house. My wife would say, go out and look in the front yard, there'd be a dead grouse. I'm like, oh, good. I got a grouse to eat out of season, right? I got something to put in the frying pan. And I've watched my woods get older and older and older. And a couple of years ago, we did a logging project. We sold off a lot of the big oak trees. And I get a lot more appreciation for everything by paying attention to the habitat. I shouldn't say resent. I kind of get tired of people saying the word public land before they say where they shot it or what they shot. I got a public land pheasant. I got a public land, I got a public land deer. I got a right. I mean, in certain parts of the country, there's tons of public land. I'd rather have them talk about how great the habitat was now there. Like I didn't understand until Pheasants Forever. And when I joined that, until I listened and went to national meetings, I had no idea how important bumblebees were, right? I mean, I just didn't. If I went somewhere, I didn't even correlate that we got more pheasants out of this field because there was more forbs. I didn't. It was just brown grass. Everything was brown grass to me. It really was. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but what I'm proud of in the podcast world, the YouTube world, and the conservation NGOs is how much they're putting that on the forefront. That the habitat, if you could raise all the critters you want in a pen and let them go, we know they're not going to survive, but they will survive in good habitat. Now, I would say white-tailed deer and geese are probably the only exception because, they'll live on a golf course and, geese will live in an industrial park. But that's, the rest of the picture is we need as hunters to get involved with these groups just in the name of habitat alone. That would be good enough reason for you in your organization to bring people into it. If the subtitle was, and we're going to have more flowers, that would be a great cause because I think in general, just like we just don't pay enough attention to it.
Right.
And when you get older, you get a different perspective. I don't know at both of your ages, you probably still have some wanderlust and some adventures to go on. I've already been on the adventures. So now I'm like, maybe habitat advocacy and clean water is, I kind of feel like Sandra Bullock in that movie when she was in the Beauty Queen. Do you remember that one?
Miss Congeniality.
Congeniality. And in the end where she goes, I really just do want world peace. And it was like that message that you only heard at Miss America contest. And we really should want a better planet, and I think that's being a hunter or a fisherman or any kind of sports person, whatever you're doing. Like, I would love that. I'd love to see that before I leave this earth become the glue that binds us together, more so than dogs or more so than anything I love or old shotguns. It'd be just cool to have everybody on board with how important it is. We put our finger in the dike a little bit and not see things go away that could have been saved.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point though, of how you were saying that, at one point in time, it wasn't a focus for you, but now that you've kind of like grown and gained all these experiences, adventures, that you are now more so focused on that habitat. I think it's a misconception that hunters don't care about that, but I do agree with you. I think that through a hunter's career, right? Like they're through this journey that they're going through, they go through a couple of different stages. And one is, you got to get out there, you got to kill it, right? And then it's like, hey, I want to get out there, but I want to share it with other people. Then it's like this mentor where you don't even care if you're hunting anymore. You just want to help other people. But then you almost fall into this, I have to learn how to preserve this for everyone else.
Right.
And I do think that that's something that is still overlooked by many. I think that most hunters care, but don't know where to start. And like you said, they go to these dinners, they know that they're supporting, but do they really understand the extent of how important it is to, join these different foundations to help and organizations to have those subscriptions with your NWTF or Pheasants Forever, of where that money for conservation is actually going and the efforts into habitat.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what I would say gives me, and I don't want to say hope for my grandkids someday, because that, like we started in the beginning, they're either going to like it or they're going to like something else. And they may be professional tailgaters from their college home team. I don't care where they end up, but if there's going to be something for anybody, that 10% of us that we'll call it, that like it, we need to ramp it up. We really do, because you can show a whole bunch of people how to fish, but if there's no fish in the water, it's not going to do much good. Right. But I think it's going in the right direction. I do. It's a slow row. we don't have a motor on the boat yet. We're still using, rowing oars here, but I think we're getting there.
So what would you say the best ways for people to get involved would be?
I would absolutely always encourage the conservation groups. And you can start out with, and I've said this many times, and I think I coined this phrase. If I didn't, I haven't gotten a lawsuit that says stop and deceased. That if you, in my case, being an upland hunter, 98% of my world is upland birds. If you pursue a pheasant in this country, you owe it to the conservation group that supports that bird, that does work. Now, we all know that it does more work than just for the bird. It does work for songbirds. It does work for pollinators, but you owe it to that. And then also don't just be, I only like, even if you've never duck hunted, learn about duck hunting, get into, literally get into the groups that are doing the work on the ground. And all those groups now have a very strong habitat slant to it. You're not going to get into it and not get the emails to talk about pollinators, or in the case of rough grouse, Michigan was one of the best states, and it probably still is one of the best states for grouse and woodcock. But when I talked with Ben Jones from RGS, if we don't change the tide right now on, let's just say, forest management, we're going to have to go to Canada in 20 years to find a grouse or a woodcock. And that's kind of scary, where it's like, I understand Indiana lost it, so they may not be as passionate about it. Like, boy, I got here and they were hitting the front window of my house because they thought literally it was a hole in the woods and that was an escape path, right? And they broke their neck on my window. So I've seen like that habitat. The woods haven't gone away, but nobody's paid attention to their aging out. We don't want anything to age out. I mean, I'm going to age out, but that's inevitable. But making sure that you join those groups, I don't think you can go wrong, and you're involved with those groups with Pheasants Forever. I'm sure Rough Grouse Society. I think that's a great way to start. I did something self-serving, but I told my daughters that because when you're my age, I don't know if you guys have your dads may or may not be alive. We didn't get the bio on everybody, but at Christmas time, it's like, what do you want? Well, you always tell your kids, I don't need anything. What are you going to get me that I really need? Unless you're like a bourbon collector or a wine collector, you can always find something like that. So I told them, and this has been a 2-year reoccurring present. I told them, I want you to buy a membership to the Rough Grouse Society. And that way, when I come over to your house, I've got something to read. Now, and that's their present to me is them buying themselves a subscription to either Pheasants Forever or Rough Grouse Society. We do both of those. But there's other places, you know, there's white-tailed deer, there's National Wild Turkey. Those aren't something I'm passionate about what it takes to keep those things going. But for my two passions, I literally, at Christmas, I get an envelope and it says, I've got another, you know, it's Kelsey's subscription to Rough Grouse Society again. I was like, good present for me. So I think getting with those organizations is critical as opposed to just a first step, because I don't know anybody else leading the cause for it.
Right.
That's probably my best answer.
Yeah, I definitely think that finding a way to advocate and get that information out there. I tell people, you know, you can jump on social media and share that you have this passion for doing it, but you really have to be getting in the front line and participating, getting those emails, keeping yourself up to date.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really important. It's more important than the dogs and the fun. And because if that's what we love to do, we got to have a place to do it. Can't do it in the Walmart parking lot. You know, we can have a meeting, but we're not going to have as much fun. So yeah, I don't know. And I'm sure both of you are very familiar with MUCC in Lansing. That group is the, hang on a minute, I got to kill that phone call. That group is fighting for, like, all of our groups are under that umbrella. And so you have to literally follow all of them and do the call to actions. They make it really simple. Those things didn't exist and maybe I would have been more aware of things if those existed, but you know, it just didn't exist. You literally had to go to a meeting. You don't have to go to a meeting anymore. You can find out on your computer what's coming up in Lansing in our case.
Right. Now, speaking of the MUCC, what I know that we talked about this briefly before we started recording, because we just had that big turn of events with our NRC going against Proposal G for pushing this coyote season to close from April 15th to July 15th. Do you, especially as not necessarily like towards that passing, but do you have any reservations about a coyote season now going from being open year round to now being closed for those few months, especially during, you know, the time that you're going to have these new other species breeding and you know, other pups and fawns and upland birds,
Right.
waterfowl?
I don't want to say I don't, but I don't think, because of, let's say, if my passions lay with birds that lay eggs on the ground, right? Coyote is not the number one predator of that. Now, if some science-based information showed me that the reason we've got less birds out there is not because of the habitat, but it's because of the predator, I'd be all in favor of 12-month-a-year predator, you know? So I haven't done enough research on that. And you're never going to get the youth of America to go back to trying to trap furs. I mean, I guess I could twist it and say more coyotes on the ground means less skunks, raccoons, and possums, because they're going to be getting the ground nesting ones. But yeah, I'll be really honest. I know I've never said this before. I don't know that I could shoot a coyote. I don't know that I could shoot a wolf. I don't want to run into either of them. And I don't want my dogs to run into either of them. They're so much like a dog. I don't know that I could do it, but I know people do it, and I know everything has to be managed. And that's a critter like deer that can survive anywhere.
Right.
I guess if there's science-based proof on it's a good thing to close it, I'd have to read the literature on it. How do you two feel about it? It must be a subject.
Yeah, it's a pretty hot topic, because for those that are listening that don't know, Proposal G is a standpoint of that they cannot change these laws, restrictions, and regulations without sound scientific evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason that this was overturned by our NRC was based on social science.
Oh.
So that is the problem that we are seeing, because for those that don't know, coyote season wasn't always open year round. In 2016, they NRC is actually who advocated to have this push to being year round because they were getting so many management calls. So basically what happens at that point is DNR is called in. They need to come manage these coyotes for whether it's, agriculture purposes of coming in or into cities, or it was becoming overwhelming.
Yeah.
Well, it's done great. But now what's happening is the anti-hunters and what I call greenies, which are just the people that they don't have the education to make an opinion, but they do it based off of social media.
Right.
So essentially that's what has happened is Proposal G went against to pass that we're closing the coyote season, which I'm a trapper and we teach trapping with Women of the Wild. We do education online, in person. You're right. Furs are not, they're not going to push anybody into this, but I think that it's a lost trade. So I actually teach it to my children. We do it several events throughout the year with women, because you have those nest raiders that are definitely more of an issue. Your raccoons, your possums, your skunks, where, I manage a farm here, an area by my home where I come in for a farmer. But what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I'm removing those coyotes for calving season.
Right.
In the areas where they have too many woodchucks or they have too many raccoons, skunks, possums, the farmer will say, like, do not focus on coyotes there. I want you to focus on them over here where the cattle are, because calving season's coming and I would like to keep my cows. That's a lot of money they lose. So I understand that side of it, of it has a weighing benefit, and everything at the end of the day, everything has to be managed because you need a balance. But to me, the scarier part to all of this as hunters is I feel that they have basically found a weak spot to change regulations based on social media instead of the sound social science. And that's, to me, the scarier part, because that could end up changing hunting as a whole for generations to come too.
Yeah. When you say social media, I say emotions. Well, it's almost the same thing. Yeah. And if that law was changed based on emotional output, I'd be against that law. Because if the sound science is there, and what I do know about especially coyotes is you really can't keep them back. They will overpopulate an area and decimate. They'll just decimate an area to some degree until they eat themselves out of house and home. But so, yeah, as long as it's science-based, I don't like anything that's a regulation on emotion. It's never proved good.
Yeah. And that's the, Hannah and I had this conversation earlier today, is some of these anti-hunters choosing to, and I guess I should rewind this, because the other massive problem that I find with this, like closing our coyote season for those 3 months, I think it is something that we're going to see a shift in balance, but it's still something that we didn't lose this season. I'm grateful for that. However, the other problem that I have with this is most people don't realize that it was another hunters group that pushed for this to happen. And we see oftentimes, especially on social media, where hunters are kind of like attacking other hunters because, they used a crossbow or they shot a spike or whatever it is. But now what I'm seeing, I guess this is my perception and belief of it, is if we have other hunter organizations and associations pushing for laws against other hunters and regulations to be changed, we're attacking ourselves from the inside.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's like the bigger picture problem that I'm finding.
Yeah. Well, it's sad that kind of divisiveness exists. And it also exists in just ignorance too. It may not be, like I said, I'm not a turkey hunter, although I've taken a couple turkeys. I would never identify as a turkey hunter, but for me I would never put a post up like, oh, real hard to do, shoot a bird while it's standing there, right? I wouldn't do that, because I realize those people that do that are passionate about it, and they're doing everything that's in a controlled, regulated game fashion. I think I said this the other day to somebody, and I said it about 3 months ago on a podcast. I think somehow when you get your hunter's license, your base license in any state, you have to take a Hippocratic oath like a doctor does. to do no harm to the sports, right? Somehow, and then if you do, boom, no license for you, no soup for you, nothing, and we all get a letter S from every organization, a big letter S, like a Superman, and it goes on every bumper, on every back window of every vehicle that we drive out there. So when you pass them on the road, you're like, oh, there's a brother, there's a sister. Yeah, because that's not going to help us at all. If you do, like I said, I've never shot a coyote. I am not against coyote hunting. I just don't want to shoot something that looks like a dog. I'm a baby when it comes to that. I see him on the road. I'm like, oh, poor fella, but I don't want them overrun or, if I had cattle, yeah, I'd be hiring you to come and get them.
Yeah. And the funny part is previously to all of my experience it was 2013 when I actually started coyote hunting. And it was because my dog was attacked a couple hundred yards from our school bus. After getting my kids on the bus, I had a couple of coyotes come in and attack our chocolate lab in broad daylight.
Ooh, see, now that would change
Exactly.
me up the way, right?
Yes. So, and that was where, because I had never coyote hunted previous to that. Once that happened, it's almost like you get this vendetta and you start researching and you dive down this rabbit hole of, okay, now you're seeing people's dogs getting taken, or how, people's house cats getting taken, or, coming into neighborhoods, or just even just hitting them with your vehicle. Like there's so many different aspects that you can, like, if you start to pay attention, you'll find out things that are going to persuade you one way or the other of whether you want to be doing something. But that's the other misconception is, as hunters, we want, like, we're out here just to hunt, but in all reality, we're not trying to eradicate any species. We want the balance. We want populations to thrive, just in a managed sense.
Yeah. No, I'm all for that kind of management. The last thing you'd want, if everything was a perfect balance, well, we wouldn't have to talk about all this. But if it was a perfect balance, coyotes wouldn't be anywhere near people, because there'd be the right amount of coyotes on the ground. It would almost be like the wolf is. Like, you hardly ever see a wolf. But I would suspect that in 50 years, we might be talking about wolves like coyotes too. I mean, that kind of tugs at the heartstrings. You can close a wolf season completely on emotion, right? Yeah. So yeah, all slippery slopes. We live on a slippery slope.
It is. And I agree with you. I actually I think that's something that you need to push, is that, like you were saying with those bumper stickers, because I think that we as hunters should be each other's cheerleaders. There should be no putting one another down because you didn't agree. It's easy to move past that. You don't agree with somebody, whether it's on social media, whether it's in person. It's not hard that if you don't agree with somebody to just leave it alone and walk away from it. But instead, some of these hunters, they go after, like, attacking one another based on this, which, I mean, in all reality, look at everything, whether it's the bears out in California, whether it's the mountain lions in Colorado right now, our coyotes here, we are seeing nationwide that as hunters, we're being put on the chopping block. And I think that having each other's backs and standing tall together is the only way for us to ever succeed.
Yeah, somehow we got to get that across. Like, I was on with a guy from Hull, and I've been on with Sportsman's Alliance before. And I was like, every group out there needs to have this. When you get the membership, you get the sticker. You take the oath. Like, I am not going to be divisive. I'm going to be for whatever you're for. I may not do it, but I'll be for it. We need, like, a third party in this country. No vote, no politicians, just a cohesive group of sports people.
Be better people.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Hannah, I know that you had some questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to bring up before we end the podcast?
Yeah. I know that I'm not really an upland bird hunter. I haven't gotten into it kind of just yet. I'm working on it. I have so much going on all the time with all the other stuff I'm doing. But I always hear about, like, lower Michigan not being fantastic for like grouse And I mean, like I said, that's just stuff that I've heard. Like people usually go upper lower peninsula or like the UP. I just want to know like what habitat we're neglecting to preserve or what is going wrong in that aspect. I worked for the DNR last summer, and I know the main focus was the oak savanna and lining that oak savanna with really thick, brambles, different things like that. And we saw a result in grouse population popping up in the game area. And I know that the oak savanna is great for turkeys and deer and kind of well-rounded, but I just want to know like what else we need to be striving to protect and look for when we're out there. I didn't know anything about habitat management. Even growing up as a deer hunter, I'd see that there were controlled burns done or that a bunch of trees were taken down and chopped up. And I always thought, wow, why are they doing that? They're destroying the habitat. And then getting hands-on and being in that management, doing the field work, and getting the education, I became aware of why it's essential and how great it actually is. Taking down those ferns and those open areas allows different plant species to come up. Opening the canopy allows different growths and food. So I think it's just good to know kind of what we should strive for. If you have any information on it or what you think is the best kind of habitat that you've hunted for those birds.
Well, it's unfortunately one of those species, grouse in particular, it's an obligate to a certain kind of terrain. They cannot live on a golf course. They just can't. You could go trap wild ones and bring them to Iowa and they're going to die. So they're an obligate to a certain terrain, a certain type of environment, a certain type of disturbance all the time. I don't have an answer other than what's changed from, Indiana right up through southern Michigan is the habitat is just aging out. And the one group that always comes up in the forefront is Rough Grouse Society. And, we have the Manistee National Forest right here, starting in Muskegon County and, checkerboarding all the way up north, or actually it's called Manistee Ottawa. Now, what is it called now? I think they threw the other name into it, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about. You go there and it's just a bunch of trees that haven't been managed, haven't been cut. You could almost relate it to the coyotes. Like if they're not managed, there's going to be too many. There's such a thing as too many big, pretty trees. There just is. And farming practices, clearing out fence rows and clearing out draining we've managed ourselves into poor habitat. So I don't know, other than staying with a group that's there's probably a forestry group out there that's not about a game bird. I don't know what it is, but in Michigan, Rough Grouse Society is where I would put my efforts into. And you can learn, they do have some workshops, I'm sure. They have a lot of access to, they took a real big, I don't want to say a hit, but about roughly 5-6 years ago, I may be butchering this up, they fired their biologists and they hired foresters. Because the biologists can tell you all about the bird, but they can't go out and look at a stand of timber and tell you what trees need to be cut down. They changed their model, and it's certainly small scale right now, but it's going in the right direction where, timber management, the timber we have left has to be managed. And even if we had to cut it down and pile it up for rabbits, you're not going to keep that, my favorite bird, you're not going to keep that bird on the landscape. If we continue the way we continue. So forest management for Michigan, and you're not going to bring rough grouse back south of M46. I mean, there's probably a couple, but it's not to say they don't exist. That landscape's pretty much agriculture, but where we've got forest and woodlots, yeah, a lot can be done to it, and it's called cutting trees down, and that's another, people don't like seeing it. a clear cut's not real pretty, but it's real necessary. Fires used to come through and destroy millions of acres, and it all grew back, and nobody was there to complain about it. And now, it's almost easier for pheasants forever and quail forever, because they're saying, we're going to put more grasslands on. Oh, that's great. We're putting more on. And in forest management, we're cutting it down. We're cutting it down, and we're going to make it ugly and hard to walk in for about 5 or 10 years, So that's all we could do in Michigan, really.
But it's important that all species, management or not, the habitat still has to be maintained.
Yeah, it's always habitat. Always habitat. They like I said, other than geese and deer, and maybe to a little extent turkeys, habitat's got to be balanced. If we go back to the dog that you want to buy, it's got to be balanced, right? It's got to have an equal amount of cooperation and desire. We need an equal amount of space and disturbance, and it's got to be that way. Otherwise, we're just shrinking. Like, pretty soon this will be the map of Michigan. It'll be that big, that big. Nobody can see that, of course, but
yes, it is. It's a balance that has to be there. And so I have to ask before we go, for our listeners that want to find the Hunting Dog podcast or any other platforms that you would like to kind of drop in here for them to find, listen in, where would you suggest people go to find you?
Well, certainly you can go to any of your RSS feeds, Spotify or iTunes, and the podcast is out there. I put out 4 episodes a month, usually on a Sunday. So that's an easy way. But the Hunting Dog podcast has a website, which has a lot of other attributes to it. And our Instagram is Hunting Dog Podcast. But I also do a couple other things, which you mentioned about the film on the Weimaraner breeder, Camille Rice. They're on that same YouTube channel. You'll see some of these behind the dog. It's a project that Matt and I are working on. So you can find a lot of good education on behind the dog. It's on the Hunting Dog Podcast YouTube channel, but look at behind the dog if you want to get some deep dives into what people do to bring us these dogs that we love so much. There's going to be 3 good episodes on that. But yeah, just the podcast. If you start following the podcast, you'll hear me blather around about everything else I do. When it comes to either, we're actually trying to plan a film festival with a friend at Howell and a movie called Lionheart that's about lion hunting and what's going on out west. And we're going to try to do that down at a brewery down in Watermark Brewery in Michigan, and do that in conjunction with Boss Ammo. And so, yeah, if you listen to the podcast, you'll find everything else, because it's easy. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a fun storyteller. So I have to say that while we didn't dive into some of your greatest moments out there and some of the events that have taken place throughout your journey, I would definitely encourage listeners to go on and hear some of your stories, because you've kind of laid some of those out in other platforms as well.
Oh, yeah.
And you're a very good person, in my opinion. I think that you're a very relatable person to listen to. So I think I told you earlier that sometimes when I'm at work, I turn your podcast on as kind of the background noise. If you have a desire, especially with the dogs, tune in, listen in. We really appreciate you coming on today. And
I'm glad you guys invited me. And I told you it's so nice to be on this side of the microphone, because all I got to do is, answer questions. And yeah, it's fun. And I will say, like when you said about episodes, so anybody that's a listener of your show and they're thinking about getting a dog, like if you can cherry pick. People don't realize that. I get people that say, have you ever done an episode with so-and-so? I said, yeah, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Well, you can't find it on iTunes, but if you just Google a subject that you want, like dog training, Hunting Dog Podcast, those episodes will come up into Google, and everyone's enjoys the ones that I've done with Justin McGrail. He's a great trainer here in West Michigan, and a lot of insights on that. And we even put together an online training school for people wanting to get into, and I would say any dog, but it's tailored toward pointing dogs, but there's 20 some breeds of those. But we put that together trying to say, hey, if a person, you're not gonna be able to train a dog reading a book. You're gonna need, and this gives you a visual along with the audio about how these steps are taken. And it's I don't want to say saved, it's made a lot of people feel, got them a lot further ahead by being a member of the Upland Institute, by watching, and you watch it and you were like, wow, I didn't realize that. Just the order of things you put it into. I'm going into a rabbit hole. I told you this would happen. Somebody gets a new dog, and you had an 8-week-old dog and you went to a blood tracking seminar, right? He probably didn't learn anything when he was 8 weeks old.
No, but it trains me.
It trained you. That's the important. You got involved. People get in a real hurry with their dogs to show them what's already genetically in them, instead of working on the impulse control and the kenneling and the obedience. Those other things are going to manifest themselves. But to your point, getting involved and knowing what it's going to look like would be like you're joining a course, so to speak. The dog isn't really going to get anything from his first day out there, but you got something from it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing with all of this is you have a dog that already has this natural ability to do something that you're going to feed and thrive on that, but you need to learn how to train the trainer.
Right. And that's where you get from the people you join the group with. They hold you back. Like, no. He's not ready for his first track today.
Right.
But everybody thinks like, but maybe he's special.
Yeah.
Maybe he will find a deer when he's 12 weeks old. But no, I just I love what you are doing, and I'm glad you're doing it. I did not realize the reach and the amount of people you've reached out and reached and influenced. And like I said, I wish you were there 20 years ago. I would have just pushed my kids off on you.
Well, now you'll have to do it with the grandkids, or maybe have those daughters come out with us.
Yep. I might even get Jesse to start shooting. Yeah, maybe that'll work.
Maybe.
Okay.
We'd love to have them.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we look forward to hearing more of your adventures out there, because you're doing a great job.
Well, thanks. And I'll look for some more events with you all. And Hannah, maybe we'll meet up on Sand Road someday. And if you stop the recording button, I got to give Hannah a tip.
Okay. I'm going to do the outro real quick.
Okay.
So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Women of the Wild podcast. Please remember to get on the website at www.womenofthewild.net, where we have educational courses, events all around the nation and also internationally. We also have our wild game cookbook that is wild game recipes of all walks of life from women all over the nation. Anything from big game to waterfowl to fishing, it's all there, including gardening and foraging. We are really excited for the spring season to kick off, because we will be hosting our 3rd calendar contest, as well as our volume 3 cookbook for the 2025 year. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in the field.